All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Macro Perspective. And today we have our esteemed colleague, Jason White, with us. Jason, we're going to get right down to brass tacks today.
All right, let's do it.
I'm going to hit you with hard hitting questions. Just kidding. First, we'll give a little intro. So, we're starting off a little bit of a series here, guys. Our idea here is to bring more awareness to the organization that all of us work for. We had Josh on previously, and we had a little bit of a different conversation. But this one's more geared towards age management medicine as a whole and performance health, as we are all performance health coaches within this organization. And so my first question, as everybody that's watching this can see, we have hats and or shirts that say Cenegenics on it. But what is Cenegenics, Jason, and what is it to you?
Easiest way to say is Cenegenics is the way medicine should be run. We look at the whole person and we try to get them healthy. We're not just treating their symptoms; we're trying to get them back to optimal. So instead of just making sure they're not sick, we're trying to get them beyond that. So we use lab work, we use exercise, we use nutrition, we use medication, we use nutraceuticals, whatever it takes to get that person to where they are their best version of themselves. That's what Cenegenics does.
Hmm, love that. Okay. Um, Jameis, what is Cenegenics to you? I don't know if I've ever asked that question on the podcast.
So interestingly enough, what does Sene mean and what does Genix mean, right? And Sene means new and Genix means life. So new life. But to me, yeah, Cenegenics is that. I think longevity and health span combined, really living to a better version of you. Exactly what kind of Jason said there, especially for I believe Cenegenics' main brand, main people that they were working with are obviously primarily like folks that were going into their more experienced years later, 45 plus, 55 plus, things like this. And understanding that when you get to that point in life, it's a triangle of lifestyle, right? That performance health, and then obviously like medicine. And it's this concept of not only having a doctor in precision medicine working with you, but then having that performance health coach working there and having a whole clinical team around you to make sure you live that lifestyle and optimizing in the ways that you can. And my favorite thing my doctor likes to say is like, I don't want you to be normal, because if you look at what normal is nowadays, normal technically normal is obesity. That is the normal. Um and if you were normal 20 years ago, maybe it was normal, quote unquote, but we're looking to be Olympic levels, is what my physician likes to say. Like, get you Olympic levels as you age as a male or a female and whatever it is that you do. So, kind of creating that new life, that longevity, right, Marcos?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of putting it. I think for me, the elevator pitch for this is where, we have like synergy between all the components that Jason talked about and utilize. I mean, what nowadays is not, I guess, as cutting edge as it used to be, but we've been doing it for decades at this point. So we were on the cutting edge before everybody else kind of got their hands into biomarkers and biometrics. And, obviously it has that, it has a different feel. It has that preventative medicine feel, which a lot of people, I think that is definitely more of like the emerging words that I think are really helpful, especially like, I mean, point in case being like, I had to go to the emergency room with my daughter because she had a little owie with her elbow. $4,000 later in pocket is like what? It's like this is with health insurance. So like this, like the problems are definitely there, and it's like, that was the first like real bill that I've seen that was like, I don't understand what they even did besides an X-ray and then set an elbow, which was literally a 2 second manipulation, and that was like kind of my first thought of like, whoa, like there's maybe something a little bit broken here. And I would rather be on the preventative side and be on the forefront of being able to counteract any potential issues, because this is not even like a chronic illness thing. This was just an acute injury, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. um so Jason, how long have you been with the company?
About 2.5 years now. almost 3. It'll be 3 in October.
Does he beat you, Seamus? Are you guys like
Yeah,
Uh,
I
close
was
or?
official. I'll be officially 3 in December.
yeah, I'm just barely ahead. Yep.
Oh, nice. Okay. So you have, I think, a more unique experience than myself and Seamus in a sense, because your center in Denver, where you cut your teeth in for your first like two
Right.
years, operated in a way that is, I mean, in a good way. Like you guys had a patient base that was existing very close in proximity and coming in very regularly. Can you kind of like talk about that experience a little bit
Yeah.
more? Because I think that's kind of like where we're, really what we're aiming for is having centers that people can get to on a regular basis to stay up on their
Sure.
health.
So yeah, I didn't know Denver was special until I started working remotely and going to the other centers. I just thought that's how all Cenegenics was. Because like I remember asking a question about like someone talked about having a side job. I'm like, how do you have time for a side job? I'm like, I'm getting crushed here. But yeah, like that Denver location. At the time when I started, they were at like 350 patients with one full time doctor and two part time. One of them being very part time. I think they're still around like 430, 440 right now. Um, but yeah, so like patients would come in on average. The ones that live close enough, they were in every 6 to 12 weeks for follow up DEXA scans, just to come in and chat with the doc, come in and chat with me. Um, they had patients flying in from as far away as Hawaii, you know, coming down from Montana. They turn it into a trip where they like, oh, we'll stop in Denver for a couple of days and hang out, and someone would have dinner with the doctor afterwards. Just depending on that relationship. And that was something that was really unique. Was like the vast majority of those patients have been there for a long time. A lot of the newer patients were all referrals from the current patients, so it's just like they spend a little bit of their own money on marketing, but most of it's all word of mouth. Like, and that's because of the outcome from how good of service that they're getting there at the Denver location. It
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I can attest to like my experience in Vegas in the beginning being far different because everybody was, well, Vegas is like where it all started, right? So, people coming in, flying in, making a Vegas weekend out of it, and shoot, they would not always have the best
sure,
performance for their evaluation day because they were enjoying Vegas a little bit and they come in, they're like, by the way, like I'm still recovering from last night, and I'm like, yeah, your VO2 may not be
right.
as good, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's the fact that, I mean, if you are living close enough to get in on a 6 to 12 week kind of cadence, I feel like that's like, again, something that is, in my experience too, a little, I mean, more unique than when I first started. And now it seems like that's kind of like what people would really want to really stay up on their health, be able to come back in and see like if they change something over enough time, like you said, like a 2 month period to kind of reassess, like, is the changes in diet or the weight training or you know cardiovascular journey or whatever, having some improvements, and I think that I mean, outside of an exercise physiology lab, like you don't really have access to tools that allow you to see how things are
That's
moving,
right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So um, in this new day and age, with longevity being a key focus, and the different type of like longevity based drugs, the GLP-1s and things of that nature, um, you know, how is it affecting what you do as a
Um,
coach?
well, when I was still working in Denver, I by then Dr. McCallum had pseudo retired, and Dr. Watt was now the full time doc, and we started seeing an increase in patients coming in, brand new patients coming in and asking for the drug for the GLP-1s, and I was like, you know, after a conversation with Dr. Watt, we decided like, hey, let's start off with trying to change nutrition habits first. Like, I don't think any of them came in with already really good nutrition habits where we're like, okay, you're already trying everything you can. Yes, you need this. So we would do like, let's get to the first blood draw. Let's see if you've made changes. Let's look at your cholesterol levels and your blood sugar and all that kind of stuff. If we see you moving in the right direction. Your DEXA shows you've lost some weight, and now you still want it. Yeah, that makes sense. But we've had a few that
Yeah.
come in and they absolutely demanded, like, no, I am not leaving this office without the drug. I'm like, okay. Um, and then due to the volume of people on it, I actually I actually ran a study out of the Denver office. Unfortunately, I was about 3 patients short of it being able to be a legitimate study. I think we had 73, and I needed like 77 patients to be on one of the GLP ones to make it significant. Um, and
Yeah.
and I saw a wide range of results. I saw some patients that had really high negative responses. Extreme nausea, like had to get off the medication. I had others that
Yeah.
you know did okay, still had some nausea and stuff, but didn't do the recommendation of making sure they're eating enough protein and all that kind of stuff, and they lost a lot of lean tissue.
Yeah.
But on the other end, people that followed our advice, made protein a priority, still did resistance training. I saw people not losing lean tissue. I've even had a couple gain lean tissue while losing nothing but fat. So it is a game changer as far as that goes, but you know, that's just the beginning. Now we have to figure out what do we do with these patients now that they're at their happy weight, or
Yeah.
whatever. What's the next step?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love this. I think this is a great conversation to start with because obviously a lot of precision medicine places, Cenegenics being one of them, like this is a conversation we're going to have because if we're talking about preventative, right, we're not talking about reactive. And trust me, like I know Marcus and I talk about this a lot, but Jason about me might, hey little
She
one,
needs
what's
a
going
shoe
on?
shoe back on.
Shoe back on. I love it. I love it. So cute. Oh my god. My mom worked
Okay.
in Kaiser,
Yep.
right? So I'm used to this in Southern
Mm-hmm.
California, the Kaiser system and everything like that. But I didn't understand what like insurance policies. But she's a member services that she understands all this like insurance policies, understands all these things, and she's like, I know how these people try to game the system. Like they'll have an insurance policy that's the best policy or like the cheapest policy, but like when you look them up, it's like you live in a beautiful home, you're making millions probably or whatever, but you're trying to get this like so it's a weird system. Healthcare is like this weird system, and I kind of grew up with it around like Obamacare and all these Medicaid stuff, and I grew up with that. My mom talked about it all the time. It's just like it was just the thing. But now coming into this new age of like GLPs and stuff like that, as performance health coaches, it's quite interesting to be in the thick of it, coaching it, like talking about these nutrition habits that people need to do, these lifestyle interventions. And, all of us performance health coaches, some of us are reading that new book by Johan Hari,
Mm-hmm.
Magic Pill. We were having these conversations he's going through it 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, with our physicians talking about the training, talking about how GLP-1s, you know, have this nausea, they have this side effect, or hey, you might not even be like an alcohol. And it was interesting to go through that. And then now to have this book
Right.
affirm everything that we talked about, But with that being said, like obviously you had a lot of patients going on there and everything like that. What were some of the big key takeaways as a performance health coach? How did you have to communicate with them effectively about what needed to be done, and how did you make sure they
Well,
implemented those things? Like what were
again,
some of the
with
key takeaways? Yeah.
with Denver being the way it was, a lot of the patients came back for frequent DEXAs. So especially when they're on that, like, look, you need to come back in 2-3 months. Let's check. Let's make sure that you're not losing a lot of lean tissue. And again, the ones that did that mostly did well. They're like, oh, okay, this is serious. Or they come in to like, oh, look, you've lost 5 pounds of lean tissue to your 15 pounds of fat. Like, that's not the ratio that we want. So, um, and I did everything I could. Like, I found that protein 2O, so the protein water for our patients to drink. So, because they're not hungry, but like, you still need a drink. So might as well drink liquid protein, that isn't as filling as a shake. So like having that consistency, having that knowing that they're going to have to come back and see me and talk to me and do the DEXA, we'll know if they're doing what they're supposed to. Um, the vast majority did what they were supposed to. Like I said, there was a few outliers that I saw 6 months later and like, wow, you lost a ton of weight but your body fat percentage actually didn't change because you lost so much muscle too. So it's like, congratulations, you made it to your
Yeah.
goal weight, but you're still 35% body fat. Like, all right, now we have to now we have to
I'll tell
build.
you this. I'll tell you this. Yeah, now we have to. I'll tell you this. I think there's a little bit of a. There definitely is a cultural difference from where I'm at and where you were at when we were doing the whole Ozempic thing. Like
Right.
Beverly Hills, all right, Ozempic, and then Denver Ozempic. It sounds like the Denver Ozempic were like, okay, we'll do the lifestyle thing, we'll do all that, and I'm over here coaching the lifestyle thing. But I don't know how many times I have to tell you, Jason, how many people were like, hey, I've been on this Ozempic thing for 6 weeks. How come I don't look like a model now? Like, what's going on? And do I need to titrate it up a little bit more? Like, can I get the next dose? And then I go like, I just had an email today. I'm like, well, how has your food logs been? Let's get on a call. Have you been resistance training? I feel like Ozempic, for the people
Sure.
that don't do it right, just maybe you might. The way I've seen it is like it's kind of like another fad, like a keto diet or like a paleo diet or like a carnivore diet, where it's like an excuse to be an a hole later on, or like fasting, where it's like, yeah, technically you are eating less, but you're eating technically still the same things, and you're
Right.
trying to get away
Yep.
with everything that you were doing before, just on a less version of it. You're still drinking every night, or you're not getting enough protein, so it's like it's less of the volume,
They're
but still more
they're
of the
hoping
same
that it truly
BS.
is the magic pill, right? They want to just do the medication, not change anything, and expect it to work. And for some it will, but others they will, just like, you could do gastric bypass surgery and still end up obese after the fact. Like, you can out eat that, then you're going to out eat a medication.
Dang, legit.
um, the lifestyle, I mean, you alluded to that being really what you're hammering home. I will say that it seems like that across the board, all of our physicians really do want that as the like kind of show us that you're willing to put in this work, because it then allows the effects to truly take effect. Because if you're eating foods that do produce even more satiety, and you start to maybe kind of crave those things, like you can kind of rewire some of those like hedonic tendencies. I definitely feel like that's something like worth noting, because I've definitely noticed that across the board with all of our physicians, is like they are really wanting to make sure that we're getting after the lifestyle intervention first and foremost, and I think Seamus is right with Beverly Hills. It's just different animal. I'm sure Miami feels a little bit different as well, because of the, I guess, social status, right, of people that are generally in that demographic. And it's a really, again, it should, like, as the book Magic Pill kind of described, right, like as I binge read it, because that's the only way I can read a book. You're I think the biggest key takeaway of that book to me wasn't so much like
Sure.
the science part, because again, we've been hearing it for a while. I'm sure a lot of people have kind of heard the benefits of, like, you can lose 15% with like Gen 1 and 22.5% with Gen 2, and then Gen 3 is looking like 25 to 27. So they're getting better as they get more mechanisms of the gut to kind of play into. But I think a lot of people should also, maybe take a dive into some of the literature out there, because even if you just read a little bit of like the abstract and overview, every one of those people that were in those groups that they're doing studies had access to a health coach. And it was likely due to the fact that there were additional interventions, to kind of help them along to see more than just the percentage of weight loss. Because obviously we want to make sure that you're attaining that metabolically healthy tissue, like Jason mentioned. And I mean, that poses a good question. Like, we know that, like, in a deficit, like, it really is hard for an individual to retain lean mass. Let's assume. I mean, I don't know. Did you note how many people were like continuing to train or were
I,
trained in that
I
73
want to
percent
say
cohort that you were doing?
everybody that stayed within like a minus of like 5 pounds of lean tissue and up, like, so the most they lost is 5 pounds. Others either stayed neutral or actually gained. So I would say out of that percentage, about 98, 99% of them were resistance training and focusing on their protein. Um, it's our, I mean,
How many
most of them
percent?
were like 2 to 3. A few of them were, 4 or 5.
Okay.
Because I mean, let's be honest, most of these people, if they're on that didn't have that as a consistent habit to begin with. So getting them started in resistance training, I aimed for a minimum of 3 days usually for most people. So it was usually in that 2 to 3 range. But then, on the flip side, about 98% of the people that were big losers into lean tissue.
So, of the people, in that cohort of like your 73 people, what was the number of days that they were lifting per week?
Most of the patients that maintained or lost minimal lean tissue were lifting about that 2 to 3 day a week. Some of them were 4 to 5, but again, most of the people coming in needing a GLP-1 don't have weight training as a daily habit. So that's something that was also incorporated into their new routine is that resistance training.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And for those people that did have the resistance training, they saw like minimal loss in terms of like the relative to the percent of weight. Um, what would, like, okay, like as you've kind of like you know dived into the data a little bit
Sure.
more, like what's the, like what do you think is a realistic like percent loss? Because like the weight loss, I mean, I don't know if we've ever had a category of something that could be so effective. Like let's just say like if someone loses 20 pounds, is it like 10% as like a good realistic goal to have, and that can be like maintained with like 3 days a week of training and protein focus? Is it like 15%? Like um what would you think would be like an ideal ratio?
I mean, I guess it really depends on how obese they are.
Mm-hmm.
If they're 55% body fat, we could see a good chunk in reduction. But if they're also resistance training, we could actually see some gain in lean tissue at the same time. I had one patient gain 10 pounds of lean tissue while on Ozempic. Like, they did everything
Yeah.
right, and they were brand new to weightlifting. So it was just a perfect storm of they were losing fat and put on 10 pounds of lean tissue in less than a year. It was amazing. Um,
Yeah.
so like percentage wise, I would say somewhere in that 10 to 20% range, depending on how much lean tissue they have, how much fat they have. Are they
Yeah.
new? Are they new to resistance training? Um, those kind of things. Are they on hormone replacement? Because that will also
Yeah.
have an impact too.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, it would be continue to be great with your base of people that you have, access with. Um, again, to keep building the study, so to speak, and seeing what percentage of them are getting, HRT, whatever that degree is, and does that, mitigate the effect? And I will have to say, like, what would you say the percentage of people that come through where you've worked are getting some form of hormone replacement? Because I know it's not all, but it's most.
It's definitely a majority for sure.
Yeah, 95
Yeah.
percent. We would have to say,
Yeah, I
right?
would, yeah, because every once in a while we get the younger patient that just doesn't need it. Um, but like when you're looking at a population that's generally 50 plus, hasn't been living the best life as far as nutrition goes, high stress levels, not enough sleep, all those kind of things. Almost all of them are in need
Yeah.
of some hormone replacement.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask about that. Like, on top of the obviously the fitness, you're doing like 3 to 5 days of training, depending. We're getting the protein as one of those things. They're obviously in a caloric deficit, or at least maintaining a good protein while in a deficit. Outside of fitness, nutrition, what other changes were you trying to make with the patient base, even if they weren't necessarily doing the GLP-1 or like an Ozempic or something like that?
Um, my main focus was always nutrition, exercise, and then sleep. Because if everything I've learned and have read, like if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering, your hormones are out of whack, you're not gonna lose weight or not as efficiently as you could. Um, Plus, you just feel better if you get a good night's sleep. Like, so I always stress, you know, I stress the 7 to 8 hours of sleep to our patients. Trying to set up a good bedtime routine, that good sleep hygiene as they call it. Talk about dark, cold room, all that good stuff, nice and quiet, all the things to try to make it better. We've tried different supplements, just whatever it takes to help. Because a lot of them, that's one of their number one complaints when they come in is they don't sleep well. And part of that is because of their hormone deficiencies or their elevated cortisol levels or whatever. But
Yeah.
it all works together.
Yeah. I feel like it's like an endless cycle. Like if you don't get a good night's sleep, obviously we know that if you're not getting a good night's sleep, like there's a higher prevalency to have hunger cues that are way
Mm-hmm.
off. So you're eating more than you usually would. And then sometimes there is a stress to that, or a guilt or a shame that's compared with that. So now you're stressing about the fact that you're stressing about the fact that you're stressing out about food.
Yep.
And it's a cyclical thing, and people then feed into that. And I feel like the fitness and nutrition part, the knowledge is pretty solid out there, and obviously there's people that are like, we love to talk about, like, that are like making sure it's right. But in terms of the change behavior of the overall lifestyle with Cenegenics, that's what we're really looking at. And I think that's a differentiator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it's not a 15-minute, if that, check in with your doctor. It's an intensive day, and
Yep.
it's long, and we run through a gambit of tests. And maybe we could go over one of them. What the gold standard a lot of folks talk about is like VO2.
Sure.
Jason, like when it came, you're obviously up there. So the VO2 is up there, and they're probably a lot better because of elevation. Can you speak over what VO2 is, and like why in a concierge medicine practice, how that relates to longevity, to the labs, to your overall just like lifestyle, even if you're not trying to be a professional athlete, you know what I'm saying?
Sure. Absolutely. So VO2 simply is the volume of oxygen that your body's able to bring in and use. So that's what the letters are. Um, and the higher amount of VO2 you have, the more fit your cardiovascular system is, respiratory system. We lose some of our ability with our VO2 as we age.
Yeah.
So when we are younger, the higher you're starting off, the better off you are going to be down the road. I think I've seen, to live independently, I believe a male has to have a VO2 of at least 17 milliliters per kilogram. And
Mm,
women's, I think, at 14, which isn't that much, but we're also talking about people much later in life, right? So if we're losing, 5% per decade after 30, like that tells you need to be pretty high up when you're in your 30s and 40s before it's too late when you're 70, right? So
no, yeah.
so that's why it's so important. Like that's why it needs to be tested. Like, if you're coming into our office and you're 50 years old and your VO2 is 27 and you're a male, we're like, that should be like number one priority. You need to get that up because otherwise, well, you might have issues getting it up later. Yeah,
Hey, you
and
might
that's
have
what I
issues
mean.
getting it.
That's what
That's
I
what I
mean.
mean.
That's what I mean right there. Yep.
Need that Cialis, dog. No, I mean
Yep.
it's true, because it's crazy, because we will live longer. Like we are living longer, and I love like Marco says it, like squaring the curve. I love that analogy of like, you could be 55 years old and you could be diagnosed with a disorder or disease, and you live with that for like 30 to 40 years, and you're technically dying over a 30,
Mm-hmm.
40-year thing. Or you could die on your sword at the age of 75 or something like that. Because we don't necessarily know if we're going to make you live longer, but can we make you live better, right?
That's
That
correct.
quality of life.
Yep.
I'd rather, instead of die over 40 years, I'll just die in a day or less.
Right.
And I relate to that, because it's like, I'd rather not suffer and make everyone else suffer on me. And I mean, the things that we're talking about, like that VO2, like not getting it up, I mean, my God, like that would suck.
Right. Be a rough way to spend your last 20 years, right?
Yeah. I mean, ironically enough, like Seamus said, Cialis, but those things work off of blood flow, and the best way of helping blood flow is being able to move oxygen efficiently through your body. So it would definitely make sense that someone coming in at 17 might be dealing with some ED, along with other, brain-related degeneration,
Mm-hmm.
other types of degeneration, whether it's like sarcopenic risk and or osteopenic risk factors as well. Like you're not you're not oxygenating tissue, or I don't even know how if oxygen is relevant in like bone structure, but I'd have to imagine it is, right? Because how else are you going
Probably.
to produce force, with lips and things like that? And What was your VO2 last time? Just so everybody knows, it was like 50. Did
It
you
was
hit 50?
yeah. I did not. I was real close. It was like 48, but it was a sub max test because I had rucked that morning. Um, didn't
And you
realize
traveled.
didn't realize it was gonna cause that much of an impact, but it did fatigue my legs enough that once I hit that, whatever 320 watts or 330 watts, whatever it was, that trying to maintain that pace was just not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And okay, question for you. Okay, we're gonna dive into weeds a little bit here.
Sure.
As we've all done hundreds of VO2 tests, on different systems too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in what are some of the things like that you've noticed anecdotally, like that kind of helps you assess fitness levels based on the data as you're getting it out? Because I have a few, and I'll share them, but I'll let you start.
Yeah, same.
Um, well, I mean, obviously, like as you know, we do other testing before we go into the VO2.
Mm-hmm.
We're testing push-ups and stuff like that. So, for a male, if he's struggling doing just regular push-ups, that already tells me like the VO2 is not going to go well. Because if you don't have enough upper body strength to do 25 push-ups, you're probably not doing cardio unless that's all you're doing, which is rare. So that's one of the things. Obviously, high body fat. That's obviously it could be detrimental to your VO2 because again, VO2 is just volume of air to your weight in kilograms. Fat is non-functional tissue; it does not absorb oxygen. So even if you are in good shape, but you have a lot of extra fat, that's also going to impact your results. So those are two dead giveaways for me when
Mm.
looking at a patient and go, yeah, this VO2 is not going to be too hot.
Do you
Yeah.
like see a body fat percentage that correlates to like strongest VO2s then?
I mean, generally, I've had a few that like were up there in the mid to upper 40s, and their body fat was probably like 12 to 15%, which for a male is a very good healthy body fat percentage. Um, Even lean, depending on who you ask. Um, for females, it's been less consistent as far as body fat percentage goes. I've had some females just crush the VO2, and I'm like, okay, like I don't know if like their ratio, like what the scores are for them, need to be adjusted, or did I just have a few outliers that were just really good cardiovascular, just not necessarily in great condition, as far as body composition
I've noticed
goes.
that. I've noticed that with females. Like for example, like I just did my fiance's the other day, but I've also like noticed in her family, like I don't know if it's just females or females from like a certain lineage of Filipino culture. Maybe they were out in the farms all the time for hundreds of years. I noticed her family, like the mom will just like run, like, and she might not have trained for a while, but like she can go run 3 to 5. I'm like, huh. And then the sister will just put her mind to it, and then we'll do like a trail run with her. I'm like, I'm over here training all the time to just run this trail run, and keep up. And then she's over here like deciding one day to just run a trail run and then keep up with people who are training all the time. I'm like, there's something here. There has to be something here. Either it's a woman thing or I don't know. It's like I feel like I've noticed that.
Part of it is extra weight too. Like we weigh a little bit more than I do, and carrying that over time starts to add up.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah, those are. I mean, okay, so we're saying around like 15%. So like the middle of like what we kind of view as our optimal range. So probably
Sure.
about 25% for our females then, because that's
Mm-hmm.
where our skew is with their data. Um, which I guess I hadn't even really considered that as like I'm doing those metrics so frequently that I didn't pick up on that. I'll have to look at that as like something correlative in the future. But for
Yeah.
me, it's like in the test. One of the ones I found really interesting was heart rate variance. So not variability, but variance.
Mm-hmm.
I called it span initially, but then Rudy was like, oh, Rudy, our VP of Performance Health, who will be on eventually. I was like, I've noticed that if people have the ability to get 100 beat difference between resting measure and then in their test, they generally have a pretty decent level of fitness, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that was like one that like kept on popping up. I was like, oh yeah, this person's at 8. They're only at 80 beats, and I was like, they're probably okay, but not great. If they're beyond 100, they're doing pretty good. There are some slight differences there though. If there is like an ACE inhibitor or a beta blocker, that will
Sure.
definitely skew that for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, this person's heart rate's not really doing what they should be doing.
Right.
It always ships me out. I'm like,
Yep.
I check their paperwork, and then I have to double check with them, and they're like, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I'm like, what the hell? Because sometimes I've literally been on that. I'm looking at the data plot, and I'm like, I bring the physician, and I'm like, yo, do we gotta send this person into emergency room, or like, what's going on here? And then we ask him, like, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah. So that one, and I will say that like we will sometimes have them do like their CT angiograms like that day before, so it'll definitely skew that heart rate data sometimes. Not always, but it's an occasional thing. So I mean, that's one thing to be aware of if you ever do
Sure.
things that or take things like that. And the other one, outside of the variance, damn, what was it? Oh, I'm gonna
Do you
bring
look
it up.
at
The big one was
ventilation, like lung capacity, like all like the? Are you talking about that, Marcos?
Yeah, I guess you could kind of look at it as like how long they kind of buffer, between like aerobic and that like lactate threshold at times.
Yeah,
Sometimes they're a little bit better. So like, for people that are science nerds, somewhere between the 0.85 number to 1.0, how long are they kind of sustaining that? And then different people have just different types of training mechanisms too, right? So I know that for me, like I get anaerobic and I can sustain it for like quote by definition like 2 or 3 minutes, which you shouldn't be able to theoretically do. I assure you, I'm going hard enough, but like I don't train a lot of aerobic stuff, so maybe that's just like I've made up some adaptations to like do that. And also comparatively, the nice thing to know was the data points on multiple different systems, because there are different like hardwares out there. Um, they were really similar in terms of the heart rate and the respiratory exchange ratio. For me personally, when I've tested it on a few different ones, and I'm like, all right, like I would have to say that like these tests are very pretty consistent in terms of like where those ratio numbers are and the heart rates that correspond to it. Um, so I mean, like those are just things I've observed after 5 years of administering it. The variance is definitely a big one. The different things with heart rate, and the one thing I noticed too is like sometimes I think people are like they just get started. It feels like they're just getting started and then they kerplunk, because of the resistance and the wattage jump.
Yep.
And I'm always baffled by that. But then going back to what Jason I said, yeah, maybe they did do something the day before that was a little leg intensive, and I haven't really given that enough stock. But if you're saying it made a little bit of a difference, like what was that? Maybe 5% for you, 5, ten
Yeah.
percent difference.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant. So, yeah, for everybody that's listening to this, like if you're gonna do the test, like come in rested and ready to go.
I had a patient in Houston who did a hard bike ride the day before and then did her VO2. And I looked at results. I'm like, compared to her last one, I'm like, what happened? I'm like, some of the things were better, but like her overall results were way worse. I'm like, when I'm talking to her and she's like, oh yeah, I went for a hard, like 12-mile bike ride yesterday. I'm like, did you not think maybe that might have an impact on how your legs are going to do today? She's like, oh, I didn't
yeah,
even think. She's like, it wasn't supposed to be a hard ride. And then she was short
I
on
totally
time,
would.
so it turned into a hard ride. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, there you go.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So talking about VO2 and stuff like that, based off that type of testing, right, Jason? Like, so when you're training clientele and stuff like that, how do you like to implement that into their training program? Obviously, you talked about resistance training,
Sure,
right? That's important. Um, but we don't necessarily like. Let's not talk about necessarily about like because I know it's always like the thing, but like fat loss, but just from like a standpoint of like just
sure.
raising your VO2, what are you
Yep.
going to do with that person to increase their VO2 capacity?
Well, I use two different protocols. So most of our patients are, as you know, like business owners, executives, whatever. So they're short on time. So for those, primarily stick to the high intensity interval training. Try to get them up to about 80-90% of their max. Hold that for 2 to 3 minutes, and then come back down, recover, and repeat that for 15-20 minutes. Um, for those that have the ability, I will do longer zone 2 sessions for 45 to 60 minutes. So
Yeah,
I like that just because it doesn't beat them up and it's less stress on the body as far as compared to like a high intensity work. Because a
yeah,
lot of our patients are stressed out already. And now you throw an intense workout, throw an intense cardio at them, and, something's going to give at some point.
yeah,
So I try to get patients to do at least one zone 2 workout per week, but I've had others that just do not like the high intensity, so they do 3 zone 2 workouts in a week.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. I like that, like, you're giving them those options, and I think it's important too. I think Marcos was running this Zone 2 experiment, and I was talking to my fiance about this because we're getting deep in this data. I'm like over here, like, get me a VO2 master so we can do it at the row or do it at the ski, or not just do it on a
Mm-hmm.
bike, and do it on different applications. Um, but one of the things Marcos was saying was like the recovery factor from the Zone 2.
Mm-hmm.
Just having that little extra blood flow, getting that hydrogen ions or the lactic acid, or just kind of the tissue moving, getting blood flow, getting your lungs going. Like, it's not a hard workout that's going to beat you up, right? It's long. I know you're busy, guys, but if it's like an hour that you can do, maybe watching TV, put the bike on, or maybe you're just kind of like doing something for like an hour. Um, I know, Marcus, you were saying like, hey, you were feeling like recovered, like the next day you're able to do more things and do
Mhm.
stuff like that, right?
Yeah, HRV was showing improvements. It's kind of where I ran the experiment for a brief period of time just to see like what I could capture. And the days after was a better state of readiness and a better recovered heart rate and better HRV. Um, and it was like after even after like a leg day doing a zone 2 session, it seemed to like have some benefits just to like kind of help flush some stuff out. So that was really interesting and kind of again like I thought maybe I was doing too much is why I started that like testing myself. And for everybody that's interested, the Elite HRV is an app that you could utilize that uses a chest strap. So it's dual purpose. You can use your chest strap to do and track your zone 2 or your intervals. But you can also just put it on, do a 2.5 minute reading first thing in the morning, and kind of just like kind of get a gauge, and it kind of starts developing like a scoring system. I had one day where it like was like a 2, but most days were like 8, 9, 10 on the recovery. And the day of the 2, like it was ironically was like a day I did nothing. I like just sat around the house. I didn't get enough steps in. My recovery went down. And I was like,
Mm,
man, I guess like the movement is medicine thing was like a real thing. And it was, it was unintentional. I think it was like a 2 patient day. So I was just busy, and but I was like, man, I probably just need to come home and just get a little bit, and I didn't like, I was trying to always aim for about 45 minutes. Sometimes it would squeak up to 60, but I mean, maybe there was benefit. A lot of people talk about like even just beyond 20 is where you're going to maybe see the zone 2 benefits and maybe help recovery. So I might go back and try that.
yeah,
Because again, it's like, yeah, like why would you do that on any, like on your day off? Right. Well, yeah,
yeah,
it's like you're resting from intensity and resistance potentially, but you still maybe need to do something just to kind of get a little bit of extra like stroke volume of the heart. Um, and Yeah, I mean, I will say though, like I was genuinely surprised that my resting heart rate isn't as good as it used to be. Like when I wake up in the morning, and I do attribute that personally to not having as much strain with like zone 4, 5, like CrossFit style workouts.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So I think like as we transcend just like simple applications that we get from VO2, the training style and things that you enjoy could have additional benefits that go beyond just what we know from a clinical setting for sure.
Sure.
yeah,
Like, so my family, when we're all together, which unfortunately is not very often anymore, we will do a family walk. Usually after dinner, but sometimes before. And I carry my 35-pound daughter in a backpack, so I get a little mini ruck in.
yeah,
So we're maintaining a good pace. It's not leisurely. It takes us about, depending on how many times the dogs stop to pee and stuff, like it's usually about 20 minutes of for a mile and a half or so. So and then like I said, with her, I'm getting my heart rate up high enough that yeah, I'm getting a good 20-minute zone 2 workout, and it's
yeah,
just helps in the day and helps flush out some of the stuff, and obviously helps burn off some of the carbohydrates that is just consumed for dinner. So
yeah. No,
Mm.
it's a good point. I do want to say, like, running the experiment, I gotta throw out to Jason, my boy Jason here gave me a little present, was the Whoop 4.0. It's been super helpful for me, so I really got appreciate you for that, Jason.
of
I
course,
actually love this thing, man.
yeah,
And I'll ask you your experience on like the thing that you've been doing, but it took a while to calibrate for me. And one of our other performance health coaches, Josh, like he was asking me about like how long did it take to calibrate? I'm like, dude, it says 7 days, but it actually took probably a little bit longer
Mm-hmm.
for me. But it actually understands me now, this HRV stuff, and it's also doing other things other than just the HRV. It's figuring out other models. But what I love about it is I knew there was a day we were moving the new Cenegenics office, and I've been up since 4, and up until like 9, but like no like stopping. There was like you just ate, but you were like moving the whole day. My recovery was shot. I knew it, the thing knew it,
Yep.
but then what was great was to know that like in a 3-day cycle, which is what I kind of feel like is in my body every 3 days, like I kind of re-up on energy, and then it was like 99%, or I even got 100% on my sleep score, and it was like, you're in the max strain, go hard today. And I was like,
Yep.
yeah, I am going to go hard today. And
Yep.
it figured me out, and it's been really cool. So I do like the wearables a little bit to help out, obviously as a tool. It's not end all be all, you don't necessarily need to have it,
Sure.
but I think it's great. I wanted to ask your experience on just kind of like how you're living the Cenegenics lifestyle with like some tools and stuff like that. I know you might be using that one Morpheus right now.
Yep.
How are you utilizing that? And yeah, how are you working your training around that recovery strain, which is kind of important on top of fitness and nutrition, sleep, and stress?
Yep. So, like you said, I did have Whoop. I used that for 3 years. So I had the 3.0, then the 4.0. And I got to a point where I was like, man, I think I've kind of maxed out what I'm going to pick up from this. And that's when I gave it to you. And I ordered the Morpheus, which was designed by Joel Jameson, who's a cardio guru. And what I like about this is every day that you put it on in the morning and get it your base reading, it will set your heart rate training zones based off of your recovery. So based off your HRV. So it uses a 3-zone system. Your first zone is your recovery zone. So that's going to be zone 2 primarily, a touch in a zone 3. And then your conditioning zone, which is, a little bit of zone 3, zone 4, and then overreaching zone, which is going to be your zone 5 work, your power work. And so it will, based on your goals that you put on there, whether it's to maintain or improve your fitness, it will give you how many minutes in each zone you need to spend each week. So then, you can do your own program, or you can use the app itself, and it has intervals already pre-designed, and it gives you like 3 options out of each zone on, what intensity you're doing at each zone. So I've done one where it was in the conditioning zone, but you had to keep your heart rate in the top third of that zone for 45 seconds. Then you got 45 seconds recovery, and did that for 8 rounds. Let me tell you, that was not any fun.
I bet, man.
Because like at home, I have an assault bike and an assault rower. So I had to figure out which machine was going to be best for me to get my heart rate up that high, and end up being the assault bike. So having to do
Usually
8 rounds.
is. Usually is.
Yeah, having to do 8 rounds of that on the assault bike was not awesome, because the recovery, the 45 seconds off, you were just supposed to drop down to the bottom of the conditioning zone. You weren't dropping out down into recovery. So you were in conditioning for that whole time. So it was a short workout, like I said, 8 rounds at 45 seconds on, 45 seconds off. But I tell you what, it did its job.
Dude, I'll tell you right now, when I got into Joel Jameson's stuff about 8 years ago in college, that book, MMA Conditioning, changed my life. He had that week 8 weeks out, or that course 8 weeks out, or whatever. Just went deep into that. And I remember going into Texas Nationals in Dallas, out there. And there's another town about 20 minutes, starts with an A. But it was out there in Dallas. And I remember just like I was peaking. My fitness wasn't the problem. I was like, let's go. And I remember those conditioning, they were just so targeted. They were so smart. And I didn't even use heart rate. He was just giving you interval times. Like he's like, just stay in this zone. Just stay in this zone. It's a really powerful tool, and it's really great to see how well like technology has gotten, and how much better your conditioning can get, and like your recovery and all that. So it's really cool to see that. How else do you live like a lifestyle that's indicative of like making sure the Cenegenics lifestyle? I think like one of the things that we talk about, Marcos alluded to it, is brain health, right?
Yep.
Sure, we could look at resistance training. Sure, we can look at VO2. Sure, we could do DEXA scans, do all this stuff, and look at all this data, but how do you maintain that lifestyle, maybe for your brain health or anything like that, which is something that we do talk about as well.
Sure. I do supplement with creatine. I also take MitoPure, which is the urolithin A, so it helps replenish and rebuild your mitochondria. I also take Fatty 15, which is a 15 chain carbohydrate or fatty acid. Just helps with cell health. I am very consistent at getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night, usually closer to 8 or sometimes more. And that plays a big role. Like, again, if you're not getting your sleep, you're not recovering.
Yeah.
I read pretty much every day. If it's not studies and stuff for work, I have different books that I'm reading either for work or for pleasure. Let's see, I've taken, just finished my master's last year, took another programming course, just finished that up last month, just constantly trying to learn stuff. So
yeah,
all
I feel
those
like
things factor in.
you're always gonna congrats on like finish up the masters and finish up that course. I know Marcos and I are 66 days out on another thing, and
Yeah,
it's just
buddy.
like, oh my gosh, your brain is constantly having to like spend an hour a day doing this or do a deep
Yep.
dive on the weekend. It's like, oh,
Yep.
Yeah, that's more of your jam. I'm a terrible studier.
I'm like, yeah,
you're
funny,
inching your
Marcos.
way week by week for 10 weeks, and I'm over here like, I probably should do that on the flight this week. I should probably
Yeah.
dive in and like get a couple of those books to do it. But it's yeah, I mean, a master's program, I cannot imagine that level of stress. And I mean, again, like you just said, the things that help with like cognition with creatine, fatty acid, mitopure. I mean, feel like, I mean, I know for me, I've been running like the same like core based things for a hot minute, all through Cenegenics. I mean, I feel like our, mentioning Rudy again, spends a lot of time in formularies and making sure that like everything is really catered to understand what we all need, from all the research. And my stack has always been vitamin D3 with K2.
Yep.
Religious
Yep.
with that. Ultra Omega. I don't necessarily
Yep.
dose quite as much, potentially based off of some of the feedback that I think Dr. McCallan and Dr. Motari have said. They're like, yeah, you probably need more like 4 versus like 6 of the old ones. And I was like, yeah, 2 is good. I'll try to eat some actual fish.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I like to challenge myself with that because, I actually do really enjoy sardines. And I think it's a great place to get some of those EPA and DHA from some sources, a couple days a week. I've recently actually started using the phytovitamin. I did the Mito vitamin that we have for a while. And while I do think there's probably more benefit to the Mito, I came across a bottle in our distribution center. And I was like, let me give this a try. And I found that like I didn't have as much of like a like GI issue. I felt like I would burp up the Mito a bit more. And I was like, well, this one's like a little more tolerable for me. So I ordered that just to make sure like thyroid health, because it has selenium and zinc and a few other things that I definitely am not eating regularly. Like there's not a Brazil nut in my diet right now.
No.
There is cranberry juice for iodine. And I think the biggest thing too is along with like the supplements like magnesium, L-theanine. It's really it. I mean, there's like 6 that I take very religiously. It doesn't cost a whole lot relative to like the per serving basis.
Sure.
And what I'm actually super stoked about, and I'll bring mention to this because I think we'll be pretty close to rolling it out here soon, is the fact that we're going to have like our NutriPacks where we're like, hey, like specific to you based on how our doctors, deem it based off of like your lab work. We're going to have AM and PM packets, or, however many times a day you might need to be taking your, supplementation. Tear away, rip it. And it's literally like custom tailored to you, which I know is super exciting for us because, man, like I'm the type of person that has like a 28-day, I literally have like 56 days of pills like ready to go for me and the wife. And the fact that like it could just be done for me, like take my money, take my
Well, I
take
mean,
my
how
money.
about for those of us that travel a lot, instead of having to like try to divide all your pills up into a pill pack or take all your bottles with you, now you just got little bags to take.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you got it for that. I mean, it's going to be super convenient for the traveling individual, which we know. Shoot, I mean, we had one guy that came in for his evaluation, and he was like, "I was retired for -1 day." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I was literally like phasing out And I got like an opportunity of a lifetime to go work for a semiconductor company that's up and coming, that does stuff with Intel. And I was like, this dude is like uber duper smart, you know. He gets like technology at a whole new level, and blew my mind with like a few other things. And he's like, yeah, but now I'm gonna be gone for like the next 3 months, and I can only imagine, like, you know, he's like on it, and he's like very regimented, stays to his routine. And you know, I think going back to what you said earlier about, like, you know, diet and lifestyle, he talked about a lot of things that I didn't even have to bring up that we've talked about on the podcast. Like, he's like, I actually noticed that my sleep and how to like get my circadian rhythm to set as I'm jumping over, you know, going from here to Asia, or Asia to Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things. And he's like, the biggest thing that I definitely stress is resetting my rhythm no matter the time zone I'm in.
Yep.
And I have found that really admirable, because that is such a hard thing for people to do, but he's found a way to make that happen over the last three-ish years. And, you know, this guy is walking around at, shoot, I think he was like 8 or 9% body fat, you know.
Nice.
And I was like, man, I'm not gonna tell you to change anything because you're doing everything so well. But I will say the other thing he did though with sleep, since we were talking about it, Seamus, you love this. He has mouth tape. So
Good.
I didn't have to bring it up. I was like, why? What got you to that? He's like, I just realized that I had some apnea, and this seemed to like really help benefit me, you know. And I was like,
Yeah.
interesting. So
I like that. I like the mouth taping, and then like the airwave tongue holder.
Yep.
It's been good for
you
me.
can do both together. You put.
I haven't done both together. I did it once, but like my mouth
That
opened
sounds-
up, and my mouth opened up, and I was just like, I'll just stick with because I've been sleeping through and through, and like this was like experiment I'm running with the Whoop too, was like including a few other supplements like a natural testosterone formula and like an PM downer in terms of like L-theanine and ashwagandha and stuff. Dude, I've been noticing like my sleep just going deep, just going deep. I'm not waking up. The room is cold. The room is cold and dark, and everything's perfect. And then I just added these supplements in, and I just felt so much better. And it's weird because I would wake up, and I would just wake up right where I needed to be, even before my alarm would go off, and I was like way ready to go. And I was like, man, it's nice to get great sleep and not be bothered in your sleep, all that. And I attest it to obviously a cold dark room, not being bothered, and obviously that tongue piece from Airwave. And I think it's just these little tools are super super beneficial, you know. I mean, the mouth tape is great. I was into that for a long time, but I just trying out this mouthpiece, and it's been good.
That's you said the Airwave nighttime recovery one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Airwave recovery.
Yep. I have one.
So it's worth the $45 investment, is what you're saying?
Dude, the first night I was sold, and then now I want to get like one for each form of training, one for lifting, and then one
I
for.
have
How do you like them, Jason? Tell us.
I bought the CrossFit one, like, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Getting used to it was a little tough at first. Like, you know, hadn't worn a mouthpiece since playing football, you know, a long time ago. So, you know, having to fight back that gag reflex a couple times during a tough workout. But I tell you what, like, it does work. Like, you do get some more airflow going. And I've always found like that was my weakness during CrossFit, was I let my breathing get out of control, and then you're screwed. And then I got the endurance one for runs, and I really like that one because, you know, I tend to run with my mouth like just relaxed anyways. So this just kind of puts me right there perfectly. I haven't ran in a while, but when I was using it, it was pretty fantastic.
Perfect. I'm sold.
I want to get one that's obviously for clinching and like squats. I feel like the one that's like
But
definitely.
I mean, these are strong enough that you can do that. Like the CrossFit one.
You feel like that one's strong enough? Because I've been like on the fence.
Oh yeah.
One that's like quote more thick, I guess, like the powerlifting ones versus that.
Yeah. No, you could definitely. I think there's a strongman that actually is a Airwave. Yeah, or at least a couple of them. So if they're not biting through it, I'm not going to bite through it.
Energy leaks. I mean, that goes back to I think it's Jaws,
yep.
Right? Like whoever wrote that book.
Yep.
I'm like, I probably have a lot of energy leak through my mouth. I can only imagine. And
well, because you are, dude, you're more muscular. You are thicker. Your neck, right? It's like
me?
It's probably yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also like with going back to our podcast earlier today. dealing with like scoliosis or fascial, myofascial like spots that are obviously like slinged a little bit incorrectly. I wonder if it all is stemming from a little bit of like neck and jaw alignment. So I've been
Mm-hmm.
really like keen on, potentially, just seeing if that does have a benefit. And I definitely feel like it would help with benching like big time, just having something to like bite against,
Yep.
because I feel like I'm crunching anyways.
Yep.
So I'm like, why? Again, I'm like, which one? I'm like overwhelmed. I have paralysis by analysis. There's no
Right.
market. So I'll take your guys' word for it, and I'll bite the bullet and get the one that probably is CrossFit. It probably makes the most sense
Yeah,
because I
for
still
you, for sure.
dabble in that every now and again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you guys sold me on a product, great. I mean, hey,
There you go.
we'd love to.
Sponsor. Right.
We'll hit them up. We'll hit them up. We'll get them on the products. I mean, they're a great product. But
Yep.
Jason, we're hitting an hour here. I just want
Sure.
to make sure we're respectful of your time there. I know you
Yeah,
got
man.
the kids and everything like that. But
They're being good so far.
they're being good so far. We'll continue on. I mean, let's get back to like so Cenegenics, just you being the performance health coach. We've gone through this thing of you helping them with their fitness, nutrition, sleep, stress, lifestyle, and we are doing this thing of concierge medicine. Take us through like what are some of the things you really try to make sure that your patients at the end of the day are making happen for themselves, just because it's so nuanced, it's so individualized. But like, I come in, I'm a Cenegenics patient. How do you want that experience to be? How do you want them to feel working with you?
Well, something that I've had to pull back on myself is like overwhelming the patient with information, because they're with us as a performance health coach for 2 to 3 hours to start their day before they go see the doctor for another 2 to 3 hours, depending on the doc. Like they're drowning in information by the time they leave. So, I make sure to go over the key points with the patient. Stress and exercise, stress and how much protein they need, um, basics of their cardio program. And then what I really try to make sure is that they know that by the end of that day that they're getting an email from me that's going to recap everything that we went over, but into more detail. I mentioned products, services that I recommend. So like Go Ruck for rucking, different meal delivery services that we use. That way patients don't have to worry about cooking their meals. They can order their factor meals and just throw it in a microwave. So all that kind of stuff is in there. Because again, after they sit with me, they go talk to doc, and doc is going through everything and talking to them about their whole life history and their family's history. And like, they're not going to remember what I just told them 2 hours ago, let alone,
Yeah.
the next day. So at the end of the day, I want them to know that like they're not done with me once they walk out of the office. Like, again, they're getting an email later that day. They have contact with me pretty much 24/7, except for when I'm sleeping, like, for better or worse, my work emails on my phone. So like, and I'm one of those people that can't ignore messages. Like, you look at my wife's phone; she's got 3,000 different things on her phone that are like,
Unread.
unread messages. That would drive me nuts. So I don't have a single unread message on my phone. So like, I make myself reachable. Um, you know, always set up Zoom calls, stuff like that. If there's any extra information they want to go over, I've been having to deal with like some of these things that they see on social media about this diet or avoiding this food or, whatever. So like doing that kind of stuff for our patients as well is trying to get them through the weeds. So they're not falling for some of this other stuff that is, not necessarily what they need to go down.
Yeah. Well, no, it's a great question. I want to ask this one because obviously there's like nutrition misinformation. This is which is something we
Sure.
like to talk about, and we like to utilize like smarter people than us to
Yes.
showcase it, like a Lane Norton, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you this: when you dive into the space of longevity, there are people in that space that are way smarter than us, quote unquote, because they have
Mm-hmm.
MD or DO behind their name,
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking about things that are it's a specific mechanism. And now your patient who is an executive type who might be into that longevity space, who is really
Sure.
smart, how do you deal with those types of patients that are like, well, this, this person that's really respected was saying this specific mechanism. Like, what do you think about that? Or like, how do you deal with that? Like the people that are like a little bit more on that higher echelon, if you
Sure.
know what I'm talking about,
You
Jason.
know, thankfully that doesn't happen too often. Um, and then you got to remind them, like, you know, hey, is this person selling anything? Are they selling supplements? Are they selling, whatever? Because if they are, there you go. You already know the answer to
Yeah.
that one. And if they're not, like, you got to look at the whole picture. Like, we can't just take one little minute fraction of one thing and go, like, this one thing is going to cause XYZ. Like, again, it's like, maybe if you're eating 1,000 pounds of it a day, maybe that's going to make you sick. Sure. But, like, you know, having some kale every once in a while isn't going to mess up your kidneys. Eating oatmeal every day for breakfast, while there's certain ways I'd prepare it and which versions I'd buy, like all that, but, like, in the grand scheme of things, that's not killing you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think people get too caught up in the nuance of stuff, and they're majoring in the minors, right? Or, like, they're sleeping 6 hours, maybe five. They eat 2 meals a day. One of them's fast food. Like, let's fix this stuff. Once all your lab values are perfect, your body composition is where it's supposed to be. You have enough lean tissue. Now, if you want to go into those fine, minute details, we'll cross that bridge when it's time.
I love that. I always go back to the story, like back when I was like nutrition coaching for like this gym like 8 years ago when I first started. I remember like they were talking to the nutrition coach and it's like, what BCAAs should I buy? What BCAAs should I buy? And the nutrition coach is like, first off, like, are you eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Are you getting this much water in a day? And they're like, no. I'm like, then why the hell are we talking about BCAAs?
Right.
Like, so
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, when I was in my major meathead stage as a personal trainer, like, I was pretty much drinking BCAAs instead of water. Like,
I did that. I did that.
but I was on the floor all day training, so, like, my meals were morning. If I got lucky, I'd have a lunch break. If not, then I was training all day. So, like, yeah, I was drinking BCAAs all day. But, like, now that I know a hell of a lot more about nutrition now than I did then, like, I make sure I get enough protein throughout the day, so I don't need BCAAs no matter what. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
read a study yesterday showing that you don't even need to replenish carbs after a weight training session, because as long as you eat enough throughout the day, you're fine for the next day. So it's like,
There you go.
cool.
Yeah.
Ironically, I saw Ben Pakulski post that he was like, "Yeah, you probably should wait 30 minutes before ingesting carbohydrates after your session," and I thought that was really interesting. As like that was like one of his core tenets. He had like 27 or 30 of them, and I was like,
Jeez.
it really goes like against. I mean, they were all like very, everything we've kind of talked about today, in
Sure.
principle. But like I thought that one was interesting because it's like, we always talk about like quote the anabolic window, and a lot of
Sure.
people like
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about, do I need that afterwards? And here's a guy
Mm-hmm.
that's like been to the highest level on stage, and was saying like, no, like one of my rules for like, I guess more of this longevity version of himself was like, yeah, kind of wait, give yourself some time to like recover and get your heart rate down and be more parasympathetic to actually like be ready to actually absorb your nutrients. And I was like, okay. So I don't
Yeah.
feel as bad about taking my drive
Sure.
home and maybe making the coffee and relaxing with the wife for a few minutes before, and like, making a fresh breakfast in the morning.
Yep. What I've been
Which
doing post workout is, I actually lay down, put my legs up on a bench at a 90 degrees, lay on my back, and just do some breath work for like 5 minutes. So
Love
I'm
that.
back
that's
to
been shown to be
parasympathetic.
that's been shown to be like one of the things that certain high level like athlete coaches will make their people do is like just breathe
Mm-hmm.
after a session. And again, like you just said, like we can maybe major in the minors once you kind of get the core things down, your square meals, however you want to do it. I really like the Dolce principle, where it's like, can we like kind of do 4x4 with 2 palms of protein? You know what I mean? Like, what does that look like?
Yep.
Have you ever tried that? Is that simple enough for you? Can you do it with factor meals, like you said? And that, I like, the PN hand measurement with that. I was like, just take this with you. Literally, you're going to leave the session being like, hey, you have your hand, put it next to basically every, lean source of protein out there. Here's the list of those things. For most females, can you get 5 of them? For most guys, it's about, 6, 7 on average, unless they're a little more muscle bound. And let's start there, because like that's like a hard application thing to do for a lot of people. And I'm like, that's even my role. I'm like, man, if I'm not getting palms and I'm getting bars, I'm probably not pre-planning my day enough or thinking
Right.
enough,
Yep.
like making it really simple. Um,
Yeah.
and as we wrap this up though, Jason, like, and we've talked about a lot of things. We talked about like getting labs and check and whatnot. And you're 40? How old are you?
41, turn
41.
42 this
Got 10
summer.
years on us, Marcos. Got 10 years on us, man.
Yeah.
Wisdom.
Still an absolute beast. He's still playing rugby, dude. Still playing
I
rugby.
wouldn't touch it, dude. I wouldn't touch it because he's like, hey, didn't you come to a visit where you had like a black eye or something like that? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're like, sorry guys, I had a game this weekend, and
Yep.
but I think a lot of people would like to hear again just a quick like, you mentioned like oatmeal or different things for breakfast. Like, obviously, I know we all probably get into rhythms and stay with like kind of a
Sure.
routine with our food for
Yep.
the day. I think it would be cool just to wrap it up with us kind of like what we're kind of currently doing,
Sure.
and what our goal is. And then we'll call it quits today.
Yeah. So breakfast, it's actually been pretty consistent now for a while. I make my own chia pudding. So I use the Silk 8 gram protein milk. I hate calling it milk because it's almond, but whatever.
What is that? Nut juice?
Right.
Nut juice?
Right. So I make my own chia pudding. It is hard to like determine how many calories and macros it is because I'm making it myself and I'm not weighing it or anything after that. But like I make a pretty good sized bowl and I throw blueberries in it, and then I'll drizzle some raw honey on top of that for a little sweetness, and then I pair that with Creatures of Habit. So I started doing those. So the overnight oatmeal, they have 30 grams of protein per serving, thereabouts, and they're pretty high calorie, about close to 400 calories each.
400, yeah.
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 Plus the milk that you add into it. So, breakfast is
You're getting like
I
800 to 1,000 calories there.
I'm getting a pretty good chunk and a lot of fiber too. Like I try to start my
Good
day off
choices.
like that, and like because I start off with getting my kids to school, I get my workout in, and then work. So I'm usually full until lunchtime. My wife and I, because we are so busy and travel so much and all that kind of good stuff, and the kids are busy,
Yeah.
I order enough factor meals for lunch and dinner for the both of us for a week.
Nice.
So that's taken care of. Snack wise, I have Bearbell protein bars, which taste like freaking candy bars. And I have different like keto trail mixes
Yeah.
and what do I have? The Paleo Valley meat sticks.
Yep.
Just bought a bunch of those. I bought it for my son, but he doesn't like them, so I now have pounds of Paleo Valley meat sticks to eat. And that's really about it. Like I do the carnivore RTD because it's 40 grams of protein and it's beef protein. I'll have those on occasion, and then Element sent me a nice, beautiful box of their new sparkling salted waters that taste amazing. So I bought another case of those. So I'll have one of those a day now too. But
I was about to pull the trigger on those yesterday.
They're so good, man.
Orders. I know, like the black cherry one or the cherry one.
Even the grapefruit one was really good.
Oh yeah, I mean, didn't care as much for the watermelon. Just not like a watermelon type person, but like the other ones were again. So I mean, so you basically those factor meals are about 40-ish grams of protein. Your breakfast has about 40, and then you might use a carnivore shake, so you get about like 160-ish to maybe.
Yeah, I would say on a average day, probably a little more than that with the other snacks that I'll have, or if I'm hungry in the afternoon and I'm on my way to pick up the kids, I'll swing by Smoothie King and pick up a smoothie there. Yeah.
Smoothie King, love those, man. Just like double up.
Yep.
Man,
well,
so you got a ton of activity though too, but you're like relatively low carb, like with the factor meals because they are more kind of keto.
Yeah. So with those, the grocery store by me, they have a mixed grain bag, like steamer bag, like 90-second
like the
rice.
7 ancient grains ones.
Well, I get the quinoa and bulgur mix or the barley and lentil mix. So I'll pour a half a bag into each each one of my factor meals. So again, more fiber and some more carbs.
Dang, dude, you're pushing like 50 grams of fiber a day.
Probably, but I'm also, I'm close to 3,000 calories a day, somewhere in that range usually.
Yeah, that's what Alan
So
Aragon was saying. I was talking to him about like a year and a half ago. They were saying like, yeah, get more fiber than 40. It's pretty good, you know. It's
yeah,
what is it? What's the cancer rate? Like I don't know the exact saying, but it was like a really like per every 10 gram of fiber, it's like a weight
yep,
decrease of cause mortality by a lot. And I was like, yeah, just increase your fiber.
yep. I mean, a minimum with our patients, I try to is 15 grams per 1,000 calories. So 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories they're eating. So
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know,
That's pretty
your
good.
chia and your oatmeal, and then vegetables in the meals, and
yep,
even the carb selection are higher fiber density
yep,
foods as well, which I think, again, I think it's just good to kind of hear that, because it's like we're not advocating for low carb or advocating for
right,
whole foods and things that promote higher satiety ratings with fiber, which I think,
yep,
again, that's why I wanted to do this with us really quick.
sure,
And I can I'll run into my day real quick. So lately I've been doing like an anabolic French toast with like 2 eggs, 5 egg whites, 2 slices of sourdough, because
Nice.
people have been cooking us loaves of sourdough. So I do like 2 to 3 servings of that.
nice,
My pre-workout cocktail has like Red's powder, which has fiber in it. I'll use our pre-workout creatine, and then I'll drink dextrose, EAAs, and LMNT in the gym because my calories have been so low and I'm like bonking. So I'll do that like
Dang,
early in
bro.
the morning, 200 calories. Breakfast is like 600 ish. Sometimes I'll throw in some cultured cottage cheese with blueberries, get a little more fiber, a little bit probiotic. And then lunch is generally like rice, a lean protein, and a veg. Throw a little Kinder sauce on it. So it's literally like a serving of rice, probably 6 ounces of veg, 6 ounces of cooked protein, so 8 ounces raw. Try to do that like
Yeah.
at 2 meals. If time doesn't allow, then I'll eat like a Bear Bells bar, some fruit as like my third meal, and then dinner is generally um, like last night was Taylor Farms has this amazing like Thai mango chili like vegetable blend medley for like a salad. So good. It's
nice.
like phenomenal. Do
Legit,
that with
bro.
just some grilled chicken tenderloin or steak, typically. Again, like another serving of rice, and then kind of depending on where the calories take me, there might be some outshine bars lately. Those have been like so clutch. If people don't know about outshine bars, you've heard it here
Dude,
first.
Not
You
familiar.
get
dude,
it. They,
so good. It's
you,
like I tried the chocolate one. I think it kind of had like M&Ms in it, but it's not M&Ms. It's like
Sure.
something else,
they have
right?
one like that too. Well, I'm thinking more of the
Yeah,
fruit. I'm trying to get like a little bit of fiber,
not the
bro.
fruity, but like the. I was thinking about more of like the. Dude, I was like, dang, it was legit.
No, the
Or no,
outshine bars
wait,
that out.
I'll have to
No,
look
you're
those up.
I,
thinking.
I don't know if it's Outshine or Outwork, but one of those
You're
two.
thinking
Maybe I'm getting the mix
like
up.
maybe the outright bar or whatever, or out
That's
something.
the one. That's the one. Dang, bro,
And
I messed
so
up.
I'm getting, they're just like little, like literally they're like fruit, maybe a little bit of like cane sugar, I think, and then it's just like they blend it and then turn it into a popsicle.
Oh,
The
okay. Yeah. No,
kids,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and the kids love it. Like we all
Mm-hmm.
kind of like we'll do like the lime one or a strawberry one, and like one or two of those are 60 to 120 calories, but like it's something like again, or just some fruit. If we're like the kids are always asking me, they're always starving, at
Right.
like
Especially
9
at
p.m. They're like
bedtime. Yep.
bedtime. They're like, let any food. We're like, we're going to bed, you know. But I found that like with that, like that day, more often than not was like 2,500 calories, which was like again, and if there's days where you may feel a little bit less satisfied, you just up the vegetable content. And I was
Yeah,
really surprised because I really personally have had a hard time getting below 3K calories until I really found like, hey, spacing them out about every 2 to 3 hours, good amount of fiber, solid protein, medley is
yeah.
the way to go. So
Absolutely.
Oh, that's fun, man. That's
yeah.
fun. I'll run through mine real quick because I did like a half marathon recently. So mine was up to like 2,800. Was kind of doing more carbs near that training and obviously just getting like 1 gram per pound of protein. I liked the proteins that I was getting at, but I was rotating in more fish just because of just more of a faith-based thing. Like Fridays, like we're not doing any other meat other than like fish, but I do a lot of egg whites for breakfast. Breakfast is the same, pretty much like egg whites, whatever carb source, a lot of fruit. I've been trying to rotate fruit, and I know this sounds crazy, but I watched that Netflix health documentary, and like they're like try to get 10 to 20 different types of fruit per week, and I'm like, I barely get like 7, like I barely like get 5, you know. And they're like, so I've been trying to incorporate like more berries, which I've been doing for a long time, but trying to get bananas, apples back in, pears, plums. stone fruits, peaches, and everything. Just trying to rotate that a little bit more within my carbohydrate mix, which has actually been really satiating. And then I've been rotating in like more like sweet potato, but purple sweet potato as the
Hmm.
carbohydrates I've been using. Love those.
I love
Um,
Japanese sweet potato.
dude, it's the best. And then so breakfast is pretty locked in, egg whites and a carb. I'll do like lunch right now, which is probably like a tuna wrap of some sort, and then dinner just to not have any GI distress. I'll just do like a packed out protein smoothie, like some sunflower seed, the fruits that I'm supposed to be rotating in, and then like 2 scoops of like a plant based protein. I don't do dairy just due to the fact that I have psoriasis, and I've noticed that for me, psoriasis without the dairy, it's been good. So I'll do that. Or if I were to use like a protein, I've been also experimenting with bone broth protein powder.
Hmm.
It's a little bit more expensive though. Like for example, if you're getting like a 30 pack or like a 30 scoop for like plant based protein, it's like $40. For the same 30 scoops, it's like $80. So it's twice the price, but it's just a different source of protein, which is the bone broth, which I like. It's really good. So I like that. So I'm doing a few meals, a few snacks, but not right now. I'm going to go into a deficit just to get into summer. So I'm doing like a 500 calorie deficit in the 1900s. So it's like 500 to 600, and that's mostly been carbs. So I kept the protein and fats the same, but then the carbs went way down. So I've just been sparingly using the carbs smart, especially around training.
Sure.
My gosh, you got to make sure like you have your banana ready or like your carbs ready after your workout so you can have like a normal freaking day.
Yep.
So that's where I'm at right now, and I've noticed that's been going pretty well. And I'm getting smart with like the water intake, the electrolytes, and just all the little nuances. But that's me. So
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's a good little wrap up. I mean, everybody's kind of taking their own little lane and phases shift, and it's
yeah,
it kind of again. I think if it was more of a maintenance and performance phase like Jason, I'd probably do a lot more of those type of principles. But I found like that was the way I worked my deficit. Seamus has his version, and it's like the spice of life, really. And again, I think we all again, it sounds like we all get a ton of food variety. Maybe me a little less, just because I'm basic right now. But I do. I should say that dinner meals are always subject to change, and I'll make like stir fries and stuff. So,
Sure.
yeah,
like
yeah.
I think principles we keep them
Ooh,
in
Oh.
where you
the
at
keep them in
though?
the place where we pass them on.
If Marco's phased out, oh, there you are.
Oh, there. Sorry.
There we go.
But yeah, so guys, like this was amazing. We can definitely keep going, but I can see that we got some stir crazy kids in the background doing something on dad.
Yeah,
They're about to be home as well. If she would probably run through and do the exact same thing, and
exactly.
but daughter's super happy there.
Daughter's so beautiful, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
But yeah, Jason,
Um,
thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
And this was
we
fun.
Jason, we also want to do this. We want to shout out like for the guys on here. There is a link. Jason is biking for a cause, and we want to make sure we get that link out. You guys can help with that cause
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
donate. So we'll get that link to you. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So if you guys want to help Jason out, he's biking like a lot of mileage, and he's doing it for a cause. So you guys can donate to support. And what we'll also do, guys, too, as well. We're doing a whole, just a recap for the audience here. Like Jason is like one coach amongst many and many people in a corporation called Cenegenics. We're going to get doctors, physicians, team members. This is going to be a whole summer series, maybe a longer series to really showcase what we're doing here, because we really want Cenegenics to be a powerhouse in the space of longevity, health span, performance health that everyone's been talking about. That's been a hot minute on social media. So be ready for things to come out. But other than that, guys, we'll see you soon.